All right. So sorry for the delay, everybody, but we've had a little Zoom problem, but I want to welcome our guest speaker today, and it's Bradford Bancroft. He is one of my favorite people in the world, and I'm really thrilled that he's here. And I'm sorry that more people aren't able to get in. I don't know what's happening in the Zoomosphere, but I'm very glad that those of you who made it got to be here for this discussion. Bradford, hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
hear you very well.
Okay.
And I'm gonna pin you also just so that there we go. Now we have a close-up view of you.
Oh dear.
Don't worry, you're fine. You look great. So, how are you? Everything fine?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really pleased with the subject matter of this. As you know, it's dear to my heart, and I'd love to know more about what you all are interested in talking about today because it's such a wide range of things we could discuss.
Yeah. Obviously. And I know that you'll be able to inform us a lot about things that people have been curious about. We've been talking about theater and therapy for most of this semester so far. And that's 5 or 6 weeks. And one of the things that inspired me to get started on this was this little book that I mentioned to you that I picked up in at the National Theater Bookstore, which is called Theater and Therapy, and started just scanning through it and realizing, holy smoke, there's a lot here to talk about. And as soon as I brought it up to the class, there were a lot of people who were very responsive who wanted to know more about it. And of course, you're one of my go-to people when I think about this because of, you're a licensed drama therapist. And so, I know that you've got a lot of history and a lot of thoughts about it. But so why don't you give us a little bit of your background and give us some of how you've been, functioning as a theater therapist or a drama therapist?
Sure. And by the way, I love that book. It is one of the most concise compendiums of all of this work in combining theater and therapy. It was amazing, and I reference it in my own book that is about to be completed.
Fantastic.
Um, yeah,
Fantastic.
it really is just great. Um, I became interested in drama therapy many, many years ago. I've been doing it for about 25 years. Um, because I was so interested in how the arts, as we all know, could be used as therapeutic tools. I had been working as a character actor for many years and studied singing, voice, movement, art, the way we all do who are dedicated to that program. And around 94, I joined a company called Stopgap Theater Company, which was the leading proponent of drama therapy in Southern California, really across the country at that time. And I was fascinated by how the use of actors, a facilitator who was a trained therapist, could really ignite the issues that were at play in the clinics, hospitals, schools, prisons that we worked in. A brief, uh, perhaps, I don't know, Tony, if you want me to talk a touch about the process of that work, which could ignite our conversation a
Yeah,
little.
sure, sure.
Um, we would go in with two actors and a facilitator and place cards on the chairs of the clients we were working with. We did a lot of drug and alcohol rehab. We did a lot of work in battered women's shelters. And on those cards would be three questions: who, what, and where. If you are if you are the star of your own scene, you and who else would be engaging in what scene? What is the issue that is going on in your life, and where might it be taking place? We would collect these cards, and then we would start gathering information from the patients as to what those folks were feeling, what was happening in the scene, and then the two actors would improvise what that was about. We would purposefully blow it. Unlike many of the improvisations we do as actors, where we're showing off and showing our great ability to talk and improvise, we would really do what we call hitting the bullseye. And we would get quickly to the point of the scene and blow it so as to ignite the audience as to say, wait, that's not how it should be done. That's not what you should be saying. At which point we would invite them to come up on stage and play the wise elder, the wise friend, and teach us how best to do that scene. And in this way, they are teaching themselves how to deal with the issues that they brought into the room.
Kind of amazing. It's an amazing process. Who was it that actually designed that process?
There was a great, my mentor, Don LaFoon, started this in the 80s and took me on it at the beginning of the 90s. And he is part of the National Association of Drama Therapy, which has been growing ever since. So yes, Stopgap was started by he and his partner at that time.
So I'm curious, just going back to the beginning of that story, when people wrote the scene down, were they encouraged to write the scene that was actually that involved their own issues?
Yes, very much so. Although this is not like psychodrama, which you guys touch on in the book that you're reading, because we wanted to distance the person's issues from the improvisations on stage.
Okay.
In this way, we'd ask them to keep the cards anonymous.
Okay.
That we would say, so often the subjects, the issues that we're dealing with are things that we can all identify with. And so we would ask them to be specific about the people in the scene. Don't say me and my brother, don't say me and Frank, say me and my father, and we are having troubles talking about whatever issue is going on. And it could be current, it could be past, it could be something they're worried about in the future.
So, but didn't the anonymity go away when they actually got up and started interplaying with the actors who were doing that?
Only those that were willing to volunteer, and we would always say there is no pressure to do this. And yes, you're right, Tony. Some people inadvertently would give themselves away as they gave more and more information,
Right.
and we would just deal with that as sensitively as we could.
Sure. It's such an interesting outgrowth of so many of the therapeutic processes that were beginning in the 60s and 70s.
Yes,
And some which were the Reichian and the primal scream therapies, and those things were really kind of extreme practices to get people to deal with very deep primal issues that were happening in their lives, etc. But this feels a little bit gentler. It feels a little bit more like putting the person who is experiencing or the whatever it is, the issue that is holding them back, giving them more what's the word I'm looking for right now that they talk about all the time? Agency, more
yes,
agency over the situation,
yes,
opposed to tearing their soul apart and
yes.
screaming their lungs out. So it's really fascinating, and it's ongoing. It's still going. Stopgap.
Stopgap stopped actually. It stopped for a number of reasons I won't go into, but I continued when I became a licensed therapist to use these same practices in my workshops and privately. There's a number of exercises that I talk about in my book that include drama therapy practices. There's a two-chair exercise, which you all might know about, where you're putting the person that you need to deal with in another chair and talk to them. And then I would put them in that position. So they are taking the role of their father, the husband, the wife, the girlfriend. And in that way, they would be able to empathize with that place that they are coming from. This helped a lot in closure with people that had died and were not able to have those closing conversations with. We would be able to have that conversation in this improvisation.
Wow, and that feels really, personally, I can very much relate to that in terms of some of my work and what I've done. My first one-man show, of
Yes,
my original one-man show, as opposed to the ones that I was doing that other people had written, was all about my sort of dealing with my father who had passed.
yes,
And it was a tremendous help for me in terms of overcoming the grief and paying tribute to the life that I felt so grateful for that my father shared with me. So it was huge. But I'm a theater practitioner, so it's a little bit different. In your practice, were you dealing with people who were artists and performers, or were you dealing with people across the board who had no experience at all with theater and performing?
really across the board. Some people knew of my work as an actor, had seen the movies and TV shows, and so were interested in that, but quickly got over the, dare I say, the fan part of it to do the actual work.
Sure.
But no, I did a lot of work with a lot of artists, um, especially folks that have got some notoriety who are dealing with fame, with the idea of I'm not worthy. And especially now, as we get, Tony, you and I, when we started, if somebody wanted to, you know, tell us we were full of shit, they'd have to write our agents and then our managers, and the letter would actually come to us. Now, anybody with an internet connection, a 12-year-old can say, "You suck dick and you're all this." And, you know, anyone who wants to be a critic can be. So it's a lot tougher if we focus on those critiques rather than the wave of love that we get from whoever we're performing with and
Yeah.
for.
I mean, I'm so glad you're mentioning this because I mean, one of the things that I grabbed a hold of, I just finished reading this wonderful book by Anthony Shear, who is no longer with us, but called The Year of the King.
Mm,
Another book that I picked up at the National Theater Bookstore, and it's all about his progress in preparing to play Richard III at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And it's a tremendous, tremendous memoir of that experience of what it took to do it. But one of the things that I dog-eared yesterday was this. Excuse me. This was about a week before they started previews in front of an audience. And it was a letter that he received that was written by Chekhov. Chekhov wrote to his wife, and his wife was a performer. And the letter says, "Art, especially the stage, is an area where it is impossible to walk without stumbling.
mm,
There are in store for you many unsuccessful days and whole unsuccessful seasons. There will be great misunderstandings and deep disappointments. You must be prepared for all this, accept it, and nevertheless, stubbornly, fanatically follow your own way." Now, that's the end of the quote from the letter that Chekhov wrote to his performer wife. And then Anthony Shear says, "The strange way tension and exhaustion manifest themselves. Reading it makes me cry uncontrollably for about 5 minutes because, of course, it's about the possibility of failure." And, this
yep,
is something that I think performers bounce back and forth between this idea of inflated, capacity to succeed and absolute dire insecurity and feeling, what am I doing? I'm a fraud. I'm, whatever. And what if I fail miserably and I'm still stuck doing this? And it's a
Yes.
real challenge. Those things are really, I mean, the resilience that's required of performers is really, it can't be minimized. I've always told that to my young students, acting students, that you have to be prepared in both directions, and both things are going to come up. So, I mean,
Yes.
it's a really interesting. I want to let you talk about that a little bit more rather than, just hearing from me about it.
Well, I so agree. Just a brief. Walsh talks about Daniel Day-Lewis's experience
Yeah.
doing Hamlet and completely falling apart for many of the things that you're talking about, Tony. I'd like to tell a brief story about that happened to me. I was doing a one-man show about. I had done a movie in newly independent Zimbabwe and had gotten to go into still apartheid South Africa with a group of documentary filmmakers who were working with the ANC. So I came back and did a one-man show about this experience at the Theater of Note. Well, sitting in the front row was a fairly famous producer. And during this, one of the monologues about how we are raised, especially us privileged white people, surrounded by black servants and taking them for granted and not realizing the kind of humanity that we are not dealing with
Mm.
uh, as we are growing up in that privilege. Well, this man was sitting there frowning and really looking disturbed. And I couldn't help but notice, typically of us actors, we notice the one person that's not enjoying our performance. And luckily, afterwards, I was able to go up to him and say, sir, I noticed that you were seemed to be unhappy with what I was saying. I felt like you thought I was full of shit. And he said, oh no, my goodness. You had me thinking about my own upbringing, about how I was treating the black folks that were working for us and our family. And it was really eye-opening and disturbing. And I was so grateful to have been able to have that honest, authentic conversation, because otherwise I might have walked away from that theater going, oh shit, Bradford, you suck. It's
Mm.
terrible.
Right.
So just a personal story about that. But yeah, I mean, how do we overcome that sense of that I'm a fake and whatnot? I mean, it takes a real tough skin, as you were suggesting, Tony.
It really does. And, so many people I know jump ship. They can't do it. At a
Yeah.
certain point, it's too hard to actually be, at the mercy of, of other people's perceptions of what they do, but also of our own doubts, at the mercy of
Yes,
our doubts. I'm going to write that phrase down, actually. I think that's a good one to use in a
it is.
I think that, quite often, especially in times like these, but in any given situation, when we have doubts about ourselves, it can be crippling. And for many people who suffer from deep depressions, it is crippling. So it's really the other thing I wanted to talk about, since you brought up monologues, is that there's a wonderful quote in this book, this other book, Theater and Therapy, which you
Yes,
so glad you're aware of, and it's about monologues.
yes,
As a dramatic form, the monologue is as much a confession as it is a story. In the 1990s, particularly in Ireland and the UK, it enjoyed something of a renaissance. One of the playwrights to repeatedly exploit this form is Conor McPherson. When the device appears in his drama, typically it is used by troubled male characters to reveal their most private thoughts to the audience. Its function, therefore, seems to be something of a talking cure for the distressed character who is given a rare opportunity to speak directly to an attentive group of people. There are two examples right now in town. One is Guac, the show at the Kirk Douglas Theater, which has Manuel Oliver, who is talking about the murder of his son at Parkland, his 17-year-old son. And it couldn't be more personal. It couldn't be more heart-wrenching, but it's also he leans the show entirely. He's not a performer, Self-admittedly, he's not. But he leans the show constantly to being a tribute to and a call for activism, which is so beautiful and so uplifting. And he engages the audience in ways that are very, very generous and making us feel like, yes, we are all in agreement about the necessity to save our children, to save the
Yes.
kids in this country. Um, it's just beautiful, and it is clearly a form of therapy for him. How else do you survive the horrible shooting of your child in a school who is at the brink, the beginning of their life? Um, how do you survive that? And this is one way. This is one way, which is gorgeous.
And as Walsh says in talking about monologues, it therefore makes the audience the therapist, that we then are the spect actors, as Boal used to say. And so and I also love the point that he makes that theater is not therapy, it is therapeutic. And so that's kind of what you are describing, Tony, that it allows us as the audience to be distanced from the trauma, and therefore we can learn in and putting it through our own filters, our own experiences, and learn from that without having to go through the psychodrama of experiencing it the way that that man is doing, and so many do.
Yeah, yeah. The other one-man show that is happening right now is Roger Guenveur Smith, who does monologues and is quite brilliant in the work that he does. And this one is about Jean-Michel Basquiat, the painter,
Yes.
who he was personal friends with. And he does his tribute to Basquiat. And it's very different in the sense that get a sense of him honoring his friend and the loss of his friend. But I also, more than that, it speaks to the again, the all-pervasive racism in our country that takes even the most gifted, whether it's a jazz musician, John Coltrane, or Billie Holiday, and exploits the talent and discards the human. And it's one of the things that happened with Basquiat. He's now his paintings are going for well over $100 million. And it's like,
Yes.
ah, my God, this is, we he never could have sold a painting for that much when he was alive. But now we are. I mean, the same is true for, other painters like Van Gogh, but
I was going to say Van Gogh's this perfect example. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but this is again a story about the racism that continues. And the night I saw it, which was last Sunday, Bradford Marcellus was in the audience. Lisa Gay Hamilton was in the audience. It was like the Black community showed up for this.
Yes. Yes.
So it was
No,
very,
I love Roger and know him. He's just brilliant. He's
he
just great.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
brilliant. So, both of these are examples of the power of the monologue. And I know that not everybody is fond of one-person shows, but the power of the monologue to actually, because it's direct address generally, you really get a sense that you are in conversation with somebody who is um, allowing us to experience the catharsis.
Yeah. One thing I mentioned jokingly at the beginning of my book is that the original therapists were the priests that sat in confession, and the idea that people could just come and unburden themselves. I joke I could do without the shame and guilt of original sin along with that. But the idea of just being able to talk out what was going on in your heart and soul was very important.
Now, you did this for 25 years, right? And you're
Yeah.
writing a book about it now.
Yeah.
So,
Just completed. Yeah.
so I'm very excited about it and I can't wait to buy it. But why are you phasing out? Is it just because you're ready to sort of enter a new phase of your life, or is it because for some other reason that you're did you feel like you made so much progress in the process with people?
I'll be honest to say, I've been going through a lot of existential thinking about life, and so many of my friends, colleagues, peers are starting to pass away at my age. I'm 68, a little bit younger than you, Tony, but it is extraordinary how folks are passing. And I thought, well, Bradford, if you've got 20 healthy years ahead of you, God help me, how do you want to spend them? And I'm not sure I wanted to sit in conversation and listen to people talk. Now, I love my work and I loved being a therapist, but it was time for me to get back to creating, writing, music, and that's how I have visioned myself for the next part of my life. And one of the things that I wanted to do was start compiling these books that I've been writing for my whole life,
Yeah.
um, and get back to that. I still see folks, I still do workshops occasionally, but no, I needed to change my focus.
Yeah, you know what? You're right on time. As as my dear friend Jeannie Field, who is also my literary manager, said to me when I was in my early 40s and was going through a deep depression, she said, "And how old are you?" And I said, 42. And she said, "You're right on time, Tony. This is midlife crisis. You've got to reevaluate everything, and that's what you're in the process of doing. It will pass." And I
Yes.
think the same is true for, I relate so much to what you're saying because I announced to Gary Grossman at Skylight that I was going to step aside as co-artistic director when I turned 70, 18 months in advance of that, because I said, I need to get back to my creative force and not be administrative. I need to go back to that place. And it's I relate to you so much about this, Bradford. We have many lunches ahead to talk about these things and compare our notes. So, um, so the history of theater's therapeutic aspects. We have, to a certain extent, we've got the Greek who wrote the book. Oh,
Aristotle?
thank you,
Aristotle? Yeah,
Aristotle and the Poetics. We've
yeah,
got him to a certain extent to thank for codifying what was happening and what the quality of performance, what it was doing, because in a sense, those plays which predated any kind of newsprint or televised or recorded anything. Those plays were group therapy for the city, group therapy for the population to show up and watch conflicts unfold and get resolved or not get resolved or have tragic consequences. And everyone sat in an 80,000 seat amphitheater and watched and listened. And I'm sure those conversations when they left were full of, week-long debates about what does that mean? What does it mean when pride is too all-pervasive? What does it mean when our egos take precedence over our compassion? What does it mean? I mean, there were so many issues that they got to talk about as a result of seeing those plays enacted before them. So thank you. Yes, Aristotle, the history of how theater functioned. I mean, when I went to Epidaurus to see a play there were brochures that told about the history of people being prescribed going to see a play because
yes.
it was going to help them. And that's in a sense, these days it's gotten sort of a bad name. The idea that there are therapeutic aspects to seeing a show. And quite often it becomes a simplified conversation about, I just want to escape. I just want to be entertained. And I hate having to deal with the same issues that I'm watching on the news or that I'm dealing. So I throw that out
So
to,
don't tell them. Don't tell them. I mean, the point that Walsh was making is sometimes these days we have to do a corrective note in the program that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just thinking, don't tell them. It just do the work. I have a lovely story. I was doing what I lovingly referred to as karaoke therapy with the vets at the PTSD ward at the VA. And this grizzled old soldier came up to me. He goes, Bradford, this shit is like therapy. And I'm like, wow, thank you, sir. That's so great that you would say that, because they would be singing songs, especially these guys were mostly African American vets from Vietnam, taking them back to a simpler, gentler time. And then we would look at the actual lyrics and talk about why it meant so much, which started then the group therapy and never calling it therapy.
yeah, 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 I know. So that, why does therapy have a bad name?
Well, we can go back to Freud and the stuff that was going on there. Like everything, there's always ins and outs, good and bad about anything. And so I so agree with you. The point you were making at the beginning of this conversation about groups that I adored, the Living Theater, Judith and Julian Beck, were so outrageous, and it was a direct assault on the complacency that they felt was happening in America and across the country. And so they needed to strip off their clothes and take LSD and confront aggressively the audience. And I love that. We needed to, change, and the authors, the playwrights were, working more subtly than that from then on. But yeah, I just think it, as we were saying earlier, it is therapeutic, not therapy.
I mean, I was thinking about this again today because of the post-war period, meaning after the Second World War. The two playwrights who emerged, who were most important and remain the pillars of modern drama in America, are Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams.
And
As
I might put O'Neill in there too, Tony.
well, O'Neill predated them, so
Yes, okay, gotcha.
and overlapped, of course. But yes, you're exactly right. Those are the three giants of 20th century drama. So, but the interesting thing to me about each of them was at a time when America became the most powerful force in the world and most influential force and democracy in the world after the Second World War, after suppressing that horrendous, conflagration that was the Holocaust and all of that. Um, we were very proud. And there was a pride in Americanism that was sort of a juggernaut. It was taking over. Suddenly, America was the wealthiest, most progressive, most welcoming, most educated, most the richest and the most powerful force in the world. Arthur Miller was always pulling the curtain back and saying, wait a minute, what about the people that we're leaving behind? What about the people that we're kicking off the off the ego train? What about the people who aren't making it? Willie Loman. What about, and all these characters that he was saying, let's not forget, folks, that, there is something still brutal that happens to the people who are disenfranchised and that we intentionally disenfranchise. So Arthur Miller was doing that. Tennessee Williams was doing it in a different way. He was, just telling us about the people, again, the disenfranchised people, but in a more personal rather than, in the obviously sociological way. So those are the people that I think, those are the playwrights that have that still cast a shadow over how we present and the things that we need to and want to discuss and look at. And God knows, I mean, right now, everybody who's on the internet or at all, they're the voices of all those people, of all the people who are being left out and who are or and so I'm just I think that I just there's something about the power of that is really still really important, really, really important. And because we get breaking news every day, and it's so, I mean, just the fact that after No Kings last Saturday, we got hit with that horrendous thing that Trump put on that he's driving in a warplane and shitting on the protesters, that horrible thing that he posted, and then, decimating the East Wing of the White House. I mean, it's just like, God help us. Where are we right now? And how many, how long are we going to be dealing with this? Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going off. But I think that it's really important that our voices are still rising and being heard. One great quote from this same book that you and I have been talking about, Theater and Therapy, is the performer who came up with that notion that a burden shared is a burden halved.
Yes.
And you know that better than anybody as a therapist, that when people can get to talk about things that are bottled up inside of them and that they can't break free from or begin to heal, your place as a therapist and as a person listening is essential.
Yeah. And I think that's what the audience does too when they are going to plays. And I think to touch on what you were saying, we as artists need to offer hope and compassion, and um, because that's the only thing we can offer right now, in this day and age, is to keep using our art and our writing, our creativity to offer other ways of looking at, just as the father you said, that's working at the Kirk Douglas is doing, you know.
Very beautifully, really
Yeah,
beautifully. Can't recommend
looking forward. I'm
higher.
looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's really worth it, Bradford. I think you in particular will just it'll just fill you with so much, a sense of the value of what that effort he's putting into it is, and how to make use of it. Again, that's the activist part, how to make use of it, because it does, I mean, over and over again, I feel like when I'm hit with the news, when I see what's happening, when I see ICE, pulling people out of their cars, smashing cars and throwing people to the ground, and I just want to curl up in an embryonic position and cry.
Right.
And then I think, well, okay, what can I do now? Now, what can I do? Can I sign a petition? Can I make a $10 donation? You know, can I treat a homeless person like they're a human being? What can I do right now that makes me feel like it counters that sense of uh, paralysis?
The fact that we had over 5 million people hit the streets on Saturday is a very moving and productive way of answering that question.
They say 7 million worldwide.
Beautiful, yeah.
7 million.
Fantastic.
Um, Bonnie, you have a question.
Thank you for letting me speak now. I wanted to just add on. I came a little late. I couldn't get on, but the show that was at the Kirk Douglas, I also had the privilege to see Guac, and I was going to say that's a perfect example of a cathartic way for an actor or an actress to you know get their story. And I think that's the use of a lot of one person shows, like at the Fringe, which is every June in LA, the Hollywood Fringe Fest. I think a lot of those people are telling their story. It's almost like a therapeutic way. So, would you say one person shows, solo shows, are the best way to express psychologically what you're going through?
I'm going to let Bradford answer that.
Oh, it's just one way, Bonnie. I think, whatever gives us the experience of that trauma without re-triggering, without re-traumatizing the audience. And sometimes that's also necessary. Sometimes we need to kick, some butt. But it's just one beautiful way, and really depends on the artist's ability to be sincere and authentic in telling that story rather than a mimetic show-off monologue.
That's certainly true of Manuel Oliver, who's doing the
Yeah.
show, Kirk Douglas. It doesn't smack at all of showing off or being a mimetic like repetition of what he's already said a million times before. He admits, like, I'm not a performer. You see this circle, it's got my cues written on it so that I'm standing here on the stage so I can remember what I need to tell you next, because
So sweet.
I know it's totally authentic and lovely in that respect, which is actually, and it's very different than Roger Guenveur Smith's piece, which is orchestrated for his voice. It's
Yes.
He's very much a performer, and he creates a real sense of the music of his language. It's very studied, but because he's so talented and so rich in his storytelling and the variations within his storytelling, he carries us without worrying about, like, oh well, he's such an actor.
Isn't this the beauty of our profession and the professionals in it, that we do 8 shows a week sometimes and have to bring a freshness and authenticity to every performance as if it's the first time. And that's the beauty and profession of it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a big uh proponent of skill.
Yeah.
Uh so, I'm certainly willing to accept when something is just the authentic voice of somebody's real experience in as in the at the Kirk Douglas. But I also really, I need skill. I need to I need to feel confident the person who is telling the story is worthy of filling it, and that is a skill set that sometimes I can't bear it when the skill is under par. I'm not.
Yes. And what are the consequences of playing that part authentically? What does it cost us as performers? As Boal talks about, it really just takes so much of us out. If I might tell a brief story, when we were harking back to O'Neill, my godfather, wonderful actor named Bradford Dillman, who originated the role of young Eugene O'Neill in the Broadway production of Long Day's Journey into Night with Jason Robards, would say that at the end of the play, Jason would come in just exhausted, sweating. He'd put his hands and arms in a bucket of ice cold water and then his face in a bucket of ice cold vodka in time to get up for the next performance. To the point that you were making earlier about these playwrights and the kinds of folks they were writing about, interesting in that play, talking about the sons of the wealthy, the privilege that came out of that post-World War II America, and what it did to them to have to rise to that same level of wealth and aristocracy and old money kind of virtue. So that's what I always appreciated about Eugene O'Neill in terms of what you were talking about, Tony.
Yeah, and the historical record tells us that O'Neill put it in the safe and didn't want it performed. He
Yes.
didn't want it performed, certainly not in his lifetime and not after. It was a his private, a long day's journey into night. He never wanted to, for it to be released to the public. And it's now considered like the greatest masterpiece that he ever wrote. I mean, and then that's among many masterpieces. That's just the crowning jewel of them all. But it's the most personal. It's the one that it tells his story and so beautifully. I mean, could you imagine if if they never opened that safe? It would be like, oh my God. Would,
Thanks to Carlotta who allowed it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, well, more questions. We've opened it up. Bonnie had a question, so let's
Yeah. I'm so pleased. Yes.
anybody? I'm not seeing any hands right now. Gordon, you usually there.
Yeah, no, I have a question.
I
I was wondering, with how personal one-person shows are, solo shows, and but I sometimes get concerned that uh, they don't have a life legacy, long life, because in most cases, they can only be done by the performer that wrote the piece. And so I don't know what your thoughts are about that. I know if we have a few cases, uh, what the Constitution means to me and the Lily Tomlin show where someone else sort of stepped in, but it seems like it's rare that that can happen. And so I just wonder, if someone if if when you as a budget as coming playwright, sometimes if I do write solo pieces, trying to not make it so personal that it only would pertain to me, that it would be more universal and someone else can do it. But I don't know if that's selling out. So I'm just curious to know what Brad thinks about that.
Well, Gordon, knowing your work and your performance, it's really quite fantastic. And I would dare say, how many people could do a Gordon Blitz monologue, but Gordon Blitz, so perhaps that's the answer that, there are some pieces that you write that should be only performed by you, or you're creating a character that might be universally seen, and the ability to play that would be a different thing. Um, Having seen your work, again, it's so marvelous, and so I'm not sure I'd want to try a Gordon Blitz monologue
I
myself.
guess I should think about becoming a vampire so that I can do.
I know that you guys have a creative relationship, having both worked together with Michael Kearns, etc. And I think that, I have a lot of thoughts about this because I've kind of gone in both directions. My first one-person show was Forefathers, about the death of my father. I can't imagine anyone else doing it. And it was written very personally about my life experience with my father. Um, my second one-person show was Cologne, which now not only have I performed it in multiple places, but I got to direct my friend Harry doing it. And
Oh,
and in it, in Cologne, I talk about myself in the third person. I talk about Tony. And when Harry, in the first week of rehearsals, when I was working with him, I said, Harry, don't call yourself Tony. Call yourself Harry. Let's make this your story.
mm,
Everything else is the same except the name. By the second week of rehearsals, I suddenly realized, okay, Harry, you're Irish. I'm Italian. I'm talking about an Italian experience as a teenager in Cologne when I wrote it, when I wrote Tony's story. Now that you're writing Harry's story, let's see if we can get the Irish part of that in there. let's make it a little bit, even if it's you're half Irish and half Italian, whatever it happens to be, let's see if we can modify it so that it fits you
So ugly.
more than me. And
You know what I mean or no?
I'm sorry. Oh, and I think that was
It's like you.
and I
There
need
you go.
I needed to mute you. Anyway, so Gordon, my only advice to you is throw out the phrase selling out.
Mm.
You found your voice by doing your own stories and your own, and voice, as we know from your recent experience, voice is still, you've recovered your voice. You still have your voice. So, your voice, you've been writing the plays that I've read recently, you're writing about other people, whether it's homeless people or whatever. You've got that voice. You have that compassion for others' stories. So I would throw out the selling out notion. I don't think it's useful. Who's selling out these days? Aside from uh, Taylor Swift and Beyonce. Uh,
Yeah.
and they're telling,
I want to sell out.
say again?
I want to sell out.
Yeah, I don't think it's useful. I think, you've already practiced
Yeah.
your creative voice. Now you can apply it in different directions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really thank you for these questions, and I really am anxious to hear what other people comments or questions from the group.
Yeah, and we usually have somebody's usually going to ask something or say something. So, anybody? Because otherwise, we'll just keep talking. For those of you who came in late, I'm sorry that there was some kind of a uh, short circuiting of the Zoom thing. Colleen, you're leaning forward. Is there something you want to say?
Um, Nothing pertinent. I'm just glad I wasn't the only one who had a hard time. I'm traveling. I had forwarded myself the link on my iPad, which doesn't have the same address as my computer, and I thought it was me. And I'm grateful to Gordon for helping me. So I've missed a lot, and I can't think of anything intelligent to add. I'm just glad to be here and listen, and I'll hopefully come up with a good question as we go.
We're recording this. We're recording this so that you'll be able to hear the whole thing once it all gets,
Cool. Well, I
loaded.
hope I have the right link for the next class
Yeah,
today.
I'm going to have to look at that and why that happened this time, because I basically used the same invite that I've been using for the past few weeks. So I don't know why there was some kind of a snag in it. So apologies.
Could be on Zoom side. Anyway, I don't mean to take up time with that.
It's
I'm just
okay.
glad to be here.
Um,
Well, go ahead, Tony.
no, go,
I was going to say, while people are thinking of the questions, I'd love to tell a short story about uh, how I got interested, what happened, especially in terms of the monologue, uh, into drama therapy, because I was involved in a sense memory exercise with the Actors Studio back in New York very early. Um, and the exercise was called a jump, where you would pick somebody to be your partner, tell them briefly who they are and what the scene is, and jump into the scene. And I asked a woman, older woman, to come on. She was to play my mother. She was extremely drunk and she wanted to commit suicide. That's all she was talking about was death. And I walked into this scene, uh, and the director was talking about the senses that were happening for me as I recreated this scene. It was one of the most traumatic experiences of my young life. I was 15 years old. I won't go into what happened, but it was incredibly cathartic. The woman who I asked to jump into the scene portrayed my mother to the exact uh, moment. And um, the notion for me about sharing that scene on stage in front of my colleagues was such that when it was over, a huge dialogue started about how they remembered their own traumas in their own families. And as I say at the end of the story in my book, I didn't know it then, but this was my first experience of drama therapy.
Hmm. Wow. You know, it's so this is the scene that you're talking about. Was it actually about your real mother? It
Oh yeah.
it was
And
about
my real experience. I mean,
wow.
I, at 15, I was, I'd been taking care of her and I was the oldest in the family. And it was at that moment when I said, I've got to leave. I got to go. And it was incredibly dramatic and a touch violent. And because of that, and I ended up saying to her, you don't have the guts to kill yourself and you don't have the guts to live. And I can't live like this any longer. And
Mm.
I've got to leave. And that was a defining moment for me, which I needed to put on stage in this jump. I didn't realize. And the interesting thing, as Stanislavski says in his book, there's a part of us on stage and a part of us that's watching ourselves in the audience sometimes. And so while I knew I had already experienced this scene, I was reliving it in so many different kind of dimensions, if you will, that I knew what was happening, and yet I was being affected by this actress at the same time, and watching myself go through this experience again. So it was really complicated, and that's what got me interested in this notion of the theater as a therapeutic device.
Wow, that's an amazing story. That's really an amazing story. You know, I remember when I first did my first one-man show about my father and losing my father, my sister, who was one of the most she kept her deck very close to her chest. She didn't reveal much at all to anybody, even her closest people. Um, but couldn't understand. And one time she said to me, "Why do you feel compelled to tell your private story and to talk about what we have, as a family, have been through to people who don't know you?" And I was shocked by her question because it was so much a part of what freed me in my life. Uh, uh, you know, and performing was a way for me to discover who I was outside of that the family. So and then finally she finally accepted it at a certain point. But at one point she said to me when I was reading to her something, an excerpt from a play about others that I had written, she said she identified one of the characters and she said, "That's me, isn't it?"
Yeah.
I said, "No, I wasn't thinking of you at all during that." She said, "Well, I think that's me. That one character is me." I was like, "Okay, interesting." Now
Yes.
I've sort of lassoed her into the psychodynamics of what a performer is trying to explore in their work. So thank you
And
for
for me, Tony, there was another element to this that you're talking about. As somebody who grew up in a very upper middle class society where things were carefully unsaid about the trauma that was happening behind closed doors in that community, I desperately wanted to try and talk about these things to elicit other young people and families to talk about alcoholism and suicidality that were not being discussed. And in the 60s, we didn't really do much therapy in those communities. So that was also a very important part of my telling this story.
I think that this is, again, my class has heard me talk this way before, so forgive me for the highfalutin terminology, but I think there's something shamanistic about it. There's
Yes.
something about going to the medicine person, the medicine man or woman, and having them take our whatever it is that we're experiencing, that we've confessed to them, and embodying it so that we can see what it is that's actually that is bottling us up or hurting us, or that we can't reckon with. I think it's shamanistic in a way. It's what a
Yes.
shaman does.
Yes.
Bonnie, and then we'll see who else.
Yeah, and then I think Eileen has her hand. Yeah, so I remember taking a drama class like a very long time ago. I think maybe in camp. I think it was like an informal workshop, and I remember an exercise that they did, and I think it's common for actors to learn this. It was called Trust, a trust game, and you had to close your eyes and I think try to reach out and fall. So I'm wondering, like, can you tell both of you, can you say more about that kind of game and why that builds up trust with actors emotionally?
Tony?
I was going to pass it to
Well, it is a rudimentary first exercise. Trust is the first thing we have to do. We're in this kind of community. So the idea of closing your eyes and falling back and knowing that you are going to be caught is really a perfect metaphor for being on the stage and um, and giving yourself wholly over to the improvisation, if you will. You don't know what's going to happen. And as Tony said at the beginning of this class, shit goes wrong quickly. And how do you trust that you are not going to look like an idiot on stage? You're going to be helped by the other members of the cast and crew. So it's important in that way, Bonnie.
yes.
How was your reaction to it when you did the exercise?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, um, I had some difficulty at first to completely relax and trust. Maybe it was my own, and so that's why I think it is a therapeutic thing. Like you have to over your own issues about trust.
Yes.
If,
And
for,
as Tony will say, the most important thing for us as actors is listening. Everything about good acting is in the reacting, that we listen to our partners and then give them back our authentic sense. And that entails trusting that what's going on between you horizontally is worthy.
and it's not only, I totally agree, and it's not only one to one, it's also in community. I mean,
Yes.
one of the things and one of the heartaches for me was when schools started reducing or eliminating drama programs in public schools. I went, but that is how we save each other. That is how we build and trust community. How it's insane that we're stopping those things, because that's how I saved myself from juvenile delinquency by getting, involved in a play at 14 and suddenly realizing the necessity for expression, but also for trusting others to be working toward the same end, the same task. It's a
Yes.
community building.
And this was particularly true during COVID when I was having to see people on Zoom, especially children who were no longer able to be in a community. And we know that was the most important part of our school days, was being in community with other children and teachers, etc. So very difficult.
Yeah, and I think we're still experiencing the sort of aftermath of that. I mean, we've turned so thoroughly toward our phones and our devices that it's much harder now sometimes to engage with other people. Um, Eileen Mick, you had your hand up, and then Colleen.
I would like to ask Bradford the title of his book and when it will be released.
My book is called Rehearse for Life, which is what I call my work, my practice. Rehearse for Life, using the arts in therapy practice and life. And I'm hopeful that it will be published by the end of the year. We're finishing the design and touches now.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Colleen.
I hope this isn't diverting it too much. You made me think of improv, what it's, which I loved when I was in theater classes in high school and college, and then plays. The improv exercises were important, I felt, for bringing the group together. And I was a little afraid physically of the trust exercises. I don't remember. I know I did them. And that was great. But what has become of improv in the competitive sport is so, to me, mean-spirited, and it's wrecked it. My kid took an improv class at her elementary school, and it was already competitive and hard and fast, and she had to be funny, and that's not why she was in it. She just took it because she liked performing too. And everybody was, anyway, I'll shut up. I was just so dismayed. No. And I hope that improv is still usable now that it's been so, and I'm sorry to be so dramatic about it, but to me, it's been tainted. And kids don't understand. They see the shows and they think, okay, I got to be funny and I got to be hard and I got to win. And it's such a lovely thing. And I hope it can be brought back.
Colleen, I love that comment. And it is, we see it, and Tony will say, there are so many acting teachers that feel they have to destroy a person in order to build them back up in the way they want the actor to be performing. And I just find that so vile. And so it's in direct correlation to what you're talking about, Colleen, that these people, it's more based on their ego and their sense of what improvisation and comedy should be about, rather than setting up a stage in which everything happens organically and humorously. And Tony and I speak for myself, I was part of the Groundlings troupe when my great old friend Paul Rubens was creating Pee Wee Herman and others in that company. And it was all done out of love and the need to bring up humor out of the compassion and kindness of sharing and listening to each other. So I'm just sorry that your child had that experience, and I hope just find another class, find another teacher. Fuck them.
I think also one of the things that, just to throw in my 2 cents, because I'm not very adept, or it's not that I'm not adept, I'm not practiced in improv as much as so many of my peers have been. But I think that there is the commercialization of the stand-up routine makes it a one-person event. It makes it a singular, somebody stands at a mic and lashes out with humor, hopefully first, but with anger and with, and reaction to the world that we live in, which has so much vulgarity in it now that passes as entertainment. So I think that the stand-up aspect of it, which is singular, sometimes is part of the money-making machine that people aspire to, and that they don't get the collaborative groundlings, like, we're all in this together. We all have to come up with this. We all have to respond on the spot to each other. And saying yes is part of the essential, movement forward of any devised plot that's happening before our eyes. You can't deny. You have to, somebody throws something out and you have to run with that, as opposed to reject it. So that's part of the community aspect of improv that I think is being overshadowed by standing up at a mic and speaking your mind. And that's the stand-up version of it. Interestingly enough, and tragically to a certain extent, when I was at Edinburgh with a one-person show that I directed, I wasn't in, Um, the majority of the shows at Edinburgh during the Fringe Festival in August that year, 2009, were stand-up comics.
Mm.
And the British love their stand-up comics. So that was theater was relegated to about 1/4 of the performances that people were buying tickets to. 3/4 were stand-up comics, and that's who people were lining up to see. So, it's who can yell the loudest now? um let's see what else. Anybody, any other thoughts, questions for this beautiful man who has this lifetime of experience that he's sharing with us, and great service to certainly to our community and to me. Thank you, Bradford, for all the work that you've done so intelligently and so compassionately. Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
Come on, folks. I'm dying to hear from you all.
We know that there are other questions out there. Let me see if I have anything else in my notes that I wanted to ask you about. So we've talked about history, we've talked about catharsis, we've talked about monologues. You've told us your history, your personal history, etc. Do you think that in the creative part of yourself now that you're starting to reconsider, and I don't mean that your book or your therapy wasn't creative, it was and is, but do you think that can you see performing again as part of your new horizon?
Oh boy. I, once it's in your blood, Tony, you know better than I. I do think about it. It's marvelous. My wife wants me to do King Lear, and I'm like, woman, are you kidding me? um, I do. I mean, I just feel like I've lived my life creating project after project and just moving ahead. So I have, behind me this shelf full of a life well spent, as I call it.
Yeah.
And so it is time for me now to go back and reconsider some of these things. I've got a few projects that I'm in the process of working on. And so that's really fulfilling to me now at this stage,
Yeah.
including the artwork. And I have loved I loved what you said about yes and so many opportunities came from me. um, I was asked in 1992 to join the Columbus Regatta with the recreated ships from Europe to America. And this same documentary crew asked me to come on and if I had any thoughts about this. And I said, well, I don't really know that much about Columbus, uh, rather than the romantic notion that's taught to us in school. So I proposed to bring a trunkload of books with me, a camera, and your camera crew, and get people to read alternative versions of history that they're not taught in school. And it became a really deep, powerful project, which I was recording, and I'm currently putting some of those sound collages on my what do you call it,
Substack.
Substack, yeah, thing. Um, as I've gone back and listened to what was happening in 92, and especially because when we arrived in Los Angeles, the insurrection was going on after the Rodney King trial. So, and the school system allowed us to go into the LAUSD school system and get the kids to read these histories, which were really quite traumatic, as we were getting the oral histories of those people disenfranchised, as you were talking about earlier, and recording them all. And so I've been compiling those in these sound collages, which are really quite powerful. And it's so great to go back and look at these pieces. Now with modern equipment, I had a Walkman and a 4-track studio recorder that I was using at that time. So to be able to update them and apply the new technology is really quite fantastic.
So that's really exciting, and that, and again, you know, another aspect of your creative self that you're starting to reinvestigate and explore. It sounds really exciting that you'll be doing that. I seem to remember that I remember being on a walk on I went on a hike and I was listening to one of your pieces from that Columbus project.
Hmm.
Remember you shared with me years ago, and it was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is really interesting. Really interesting.
I'd really like to do this as like a one-man show at Skylight one night, to sit at a desk and introduce the pieces and then play the audio collages. I had a great I try to do something each October to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. And one of my favorites was going to the Salvation Theater, maybe 2002, and getting up in front of the audience and saying, look, I'm so terribly embarrassed, but the actors that I hired to come do this show didn't show up. And so I need to ask you, audience members, if any of you would come up and volunteer to do the parts for me. And having a theater full of actors, they jumped in and I said, and I hired the Philharmonic to come play music, and they didn't show up either. So I've got a box of children's toys here, and I would ask those of you that are willing to play. And so the whole thing was improvised around these monologues that I had written out for them, numbered so that they would go in order. And it was the hilarious event of my memory.
That sounds wonderful. You need to revive that. That sounds great. I love that notion that, you know, in these days, I mean, I've seen several pieces just in the last 6 months that involve an audience in a very uplifting way and make it celebratory. So I think it'd be a great thing to do. But let me just share something with you that from this past week. Um,
Yes.
I was approached with an audition for Richard III, not the role for but the Shakespeare play,
Mm,
um, by A Noise Within.
mm,
And I they sent me the sides and I started reading the sides. For those of you who don't know what sides are little excerpts of things that are scenes or whatever that you will use for your audition. And I read through them and I was like, oh, God, Shakespeare, it's incomprehensible. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. By the second day, I decided to look at them monologue by monologue, scene by scene. There were 3 scenes, and just spend one day on, or one morning rather, on one scene. And I started to make sense of it. And by the third day, I was on fire. What happened was the performative side of me suddenly went, this is where I started. This is what I love. I've done almost 10 Shakespeare plays. I started to feel so much creative energy percolating through me again that now I'm like, I'm raring to go. Doesn't mean I'm going to get in. I'm going to audition, but what it has done is it's sent an electrical current through all my creative sides to once again to get my writing organized so I can see what I can do with that, and I'm working on that to get my performing part organized so I can work on that. It's got me going again. That's encouragement for you, Bradford, to say if it, you know, once you start looking at these things, maybe in a year you actually will be doing King Lear.
thank you, God love you, but I've played Edmund, which was just the joy of my life, and
Oh,
that's about as far as I could go.
oh my God.
We'll
Wow.
see. We'll see. Anyway,
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, you know, I'm with Phyllis. We'll keep after you.
I have a studio up in Ojai that I've been renting for the last couple of years, specifically for this. this idea of getting up and having some private space to work. And the Ojai Community Theater up there, which holds a bunch of well-known actors, I'm thinking, well, that might be a good way and to do a small community theater in Ojai. So
You know
we'll
that
see.
there's a big landscape opening up for you. I can feel it. You know, by the way, do you know Raymond Singer?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Raymond Singer is part of the Ojai community, and he and his wife actually have written some big Disney movies, animated movies, etc. But he's up there, and he played the good soldier Schweik when I directed that Brecht play way back in God, 1789. Uh, um, Anyway, yeah, Ojai is a beautiful place to think.
Tony, I was thinking as I was reading the list of plays that Walsh is describing in that book, so many things that we can consider for Skylight as we open up ourselves to older plays that might not have been given its full due. I was amazed by the amount of great work that he's describing in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, that's another thing that I got fired up again this week to even not just to be a performer, but also to be a director. And I pulled three plays out that I'm going to pitch to one of the companies in town to say, here, I'd love to direct any one of these three plays. So if you're considering, and all of them have pertinence to where we are, two of them are brilliant comedies, and one of them is a Brechtian play, but that could really work in our time. So I'd love to direct them and
Yeah.
see what
Yeah.
happens.
Good. Good.
Are there any other, we're almost at time, so I want to open this up again to say, are there any final things that anybody's curious about in relationship to any of the subjects that we've been discussing in this last hour and some odd minutes? Anybody, thoughts, anything that is brand new in your thinking about theater or about I see the wheels turning. I see the wheels turning. Anyone?
A question I would ask is what made you want to take this class with Tony? What are the things about this particular class that interest you, that ignited your passion, which is always a good place to start with a conversation like this.
Thank you, Bradford. Colleen. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. I joined because I finally had the time to do something again that I've missed in my adult life. I left college too young, moved to LA because I knew what I wanted to do. There was theater here, but not much. And I certainly wasn't prepared for film. So I just ended up not doing it. And this has been a wonderful reconnection for me. I mean, I did still take acting classes from time to time, and I was a member of a theater group, but I didn't sustain it throughout my adult life. And now I've got time on my hands, and I'm really enjoying just having that, what's the word? Whatever, just fairly constantly in me, just alive again.
Reconnection.
Yeah, reconnection with me, with theater, with Stanislavski. Thank you very much, Tony. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Great, thank you.
And I think you spoke before in Tony's class, either last semester or before, and I'm just loving hearing you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Tom?
I just want to say, of course, Bradford, I'm about 30 years older than you, but I
Damn, you look good.
I feel like I've seen it all. I'm almost 98 now, and I'm in this class because I love to hear all the people talk about theater,
Mm,
and that's about
beautiful.
it.
Well, Tom,
Thank you.
and Tom, you still you have you've also performed. You're a performer, and you're an avid audience member as well, which is just as essential at this point.
My performance days are long gone, but I'm still trying to work a little bit. I'm in the emeritus acting class. I'm doing a scene from Educating Rita, where I'm playing the professor. And I try to do it. I don't like zooming, but it's all that's left for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're a treasure, and we're grateful to have you. So thank you. Um,
Bravo, bravo, Tom. Nice to meet you, and thank you. When I grow up, I want to be like you, my friend.
The last thing I want to share with everybody, because I went this past Monday, and Bradford, you'd probably be interested in this as well. There is a new website that is starting up. Last Monday, there was a community presentation about this new website. It is called Theater Commons LA, and I'm going to put it in the chat right now, and make sure that everyone can see it. It's called Theater Commons LA. And on Instagram, for those of you who are, it's the same thing. On Instagram, it's Theater Commons .la. But either way, you'll be able to find it. It will include, it's been worked on for the past 3 or 4 years by a group of community leaders, including Danny Feldman, who is running the Pasadena Playhouse, and Snehal Desai, who's running Center Theater Group, and Jessica Kubzansky, who's running Boston Court, as well as some of the smaller theaters. It's a panel of about 12 people who have put together this new website that will include listings of all the plays that are happening in LA, plus their links to their tickets and the personnel involved, plus articles and information about various movements or things that are happening that the theater community in LA needs to know about. There's been a vacuum for the past 4 or 5 years. It started just before the pandemic and got worse by the pandemic, where we've had a reduction of critics writing for the major news outlets. We've had a shrinking of audience access to listings of where plays are being done and how they can find out the information about them. This is meant to sort of fill that gap. And it's very promising. Right now, the Parenkio organization has granted them enough money to go for 2 years. And then it's going to probably have to shift to either another granting organization or private donations. But right now, it's very promising and will fill that vacuum, hopefully. So please keep that in mind if you're looking for, or even if you're just curious about what's going on, so that we can actually um, put a kibosh on this notion that LA is not a theater town. Having worked here for 47 and a half years in the theater, I've been fighting that fight for a long time. And thankfully, all of your participation in my classes and the work that I continue to do around town is proving that it's still alive and well. And there's a lot of people showing up to see shows right now. The pandemic is effectively still going, but effectively over as far as audience participation is concerned. So even if you're concerned about your health going to a theater, you can always wear your N95 mask and take the plunge, because people are showing up to see work, and it's worthy work in many cases. So I just wanted to share that information before we close out today. And if there's anything else that you would like to share with us, Bradford, you're a beautiful human being, and I'm so pleased that we have this friendship and this professional relationship simultaneously. So if there's anything you'd like to say in closing.
Just a touch of shameless self-promotion. If you're interested in reading any of the work or listening to these sound collages that I've been describing, go to the Substack, my Substack, Bradford Bancroft at Substack, and you'll be able to find me and listen and read some more of the work that I've been writing. So, but thank you for this so much, Tony. What a great opportunity to discuss this thing that we both love.
I know, and I'm putting in the chat right now. I just sent the Theater Commons LA information, but now I'm sending
Good.
Bradford Bancroft at Substack.
I think so. I'm new to it, but yes. Yeah, if you go to Substack, you'll find Bradford Bancroft.
Okay, and there now everyone's got that as well. Okay, everyone, that's it for today.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Thank you. I'm stopping the recording.
Go off and be kind.
Yes, yes, and take
What a nice send off. Thank you so much. Go off and be kind.